For more than 40 years, Cox has been investing in Hampton Roads. Our fiber network is built to deliver gig speeds to the region, enabling smart homes, businesses, and a smart community today, and to support the Internet of Things and 10G tomorrow. We're keeping the 757 connected to the things that matter most. Find out more at cox.com.
I'm Bob McKenna, President and CEO of the Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to welcome you to the latest event in the Chamber's 757 Vision Eyes on the Future series, Bridging the Divide, Broadband Expansion in the 757. We are still in the midst of the health crisis known as COVID-19, which has impacted businesses large and small and adversely impacted much of our economy. Operation Warp Speed and multiple vaccines have enabled us to see the light at the end of the tunnel. To slightly paraphrase Sir Winston Churchill, it may not be the end, but it is probably the beginning of the end. After the last recession, it took our region over 8 years to recover economically. We will not allow that to happen again. Prior to the pandemic, the Hampton Roads region was beginning to see a resurgence in our regional collaborative efforts and good signs of economic growth. Projects like the 64 highway improvements, the HRBT expansion, and initiatives like RVA 757 Connects and the Eastern Virginia Regional Industrial Facilities Authority were beginning to gain momentum and creating a sense of well-earned optimism. We now must work together as a region to reignite that energy, optimism, and sense of collaboration. The Peninsula Chamber has joined a coalition of business organizations to help do that through the 757 Business Recovery and Resiliency Framework that advances 5 strategic imperatives, including building regional unity, growing new jobs, attracting and retaining new talent, growing resiliency to future threats, and advancing regional infrastructure. In order for this plan to be successful, we must capitalize on our strengths, obviously, but also recognize our weaknesses and work hard to mitigate them and/or to make them strengths. In keeping with the Chamber's mission to connect business with opportunity through facilitation, advocacy, communication, and education, we are hosting this monthly series of moderated panels called 757 Vision, Eyes on the Future, in which we will take an honest look at some of our strengths and weaknesses in an effort to inspire, inform, and drive action in cooperation. Today's event is focused on broadband expansion in the 757. Today's expert panel will discuss some ongoing exciting initiatives that will expand access and make it more affordable, thus enhancing educational opportunities and creating better conditions for not only recovery, but the growth and diversification of our economy here in the 757. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize some distinguished viewers in today's audience. First, U.S. Congressman Bobby Scott from Virginia's 3rd Senate Congressional District. Mayor Donnie Tuck from the city of Hampton. Thanks for being with us today, gentlemen. We also have representatives from the following offices in the audience: Senator Mark Warner's office, Senator Tim Kaine, and State Senator Monty Mason. Thanks to you all for being with us. I would also like to take a moment to thank today's presenting sponsor and also our series sponsor, Cox Virginia. Cox is a highly valued partner of the Chamber, and their sponsorship for these events make it possible to offer them to you at no cost. Representing Cox today is Sarah Buck. Sarah is part of the Government and Public Affairs team for Cox Virginia. By title, she is a Public Affairs Manager. Her focus is working towards building a better future through business development opportunities, digital equity programs, and corporate social responsibility. Sarah currently serves on the Virginia Peninsula Chamber's Board of Directors and is the immediate past president for the Hampton Roads chapter of the Public Relations Society of America. She is fortunate to have many opportunities to volunteer in support of youth education programs through her employer, in addition to her personal volunteer efforts with organizations like the Girl Scouts and the Alzheimer's Association. Sarah has a bachelor's degree in communication studies from Virginia Tech. Go Hokies. In 2016, Sarah was recognized as one of Hampton Roads' top 40 under 40 by Inside Business, and she was recently named as a future famous performer by the Girl Scout Council of the Colonial Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Buck.
Hi, thanks, Bob, and good afternoon, everyone. As Bob addressed, this time last year, most of us had heard rumblings about COVID-19, but little did we know it would become a global pandemic that would bring about broad sweeping change in so many facets of our life, technology included. The pandemic has been a technology accelerator for businesses, for municipalities, schools, healthcare, and homes, and Cox has been there through it all. I'm certainly not going to steal my boss's thunder since he is on today's panel. So instead, I'd like to use this time to share with you a fun fact about the great company I've worked for the past 8.5 years. Some of you may or may not know this, but Cox is a family-owned company. Back in 1898, James M. Cox, our company's founder, purchased the Dayton Evening News, the start of what is now Cox Enterprises. Cox Communications, of course, is part of Cox Enterprises. We're a major operating subsidiary of CEI, which today is still privately held, employing approximately 55,000 employees globally. Being privately owned gives us the ability to do things a little differently, since at the end of the day, we're answering to the Cox family, the great-grandson of James M. Cox, to be exact. Our corporate culture, diversity, investment in our network, all of those things are looked at through the lens of the family, with a laser focus on both the employee experience and the customer experience. I share this with you because if it wasn't for agility, not only in 2020 when COVID threw us all for a tailspin, but for the past 123 years, Cox wouldn't be as successful as it is today, delivering services that keep customers, both our residential and our commercial customers, connected to the things that matter most to them. To help us dig a little deeper into just how much technology and access to broadband has been more generally prioritized and frankly become a major buzzword over the past 12 months is today's moderator, Marisa Porto. Marisa is Assistant Dean at the Scripps Howard School of Journalism and Communication at Hampton University. She teaches management and entrepreneurship and leads community outreach, business partnerships, grants, and fundraising for the school. Before joining the university, Marisa led Tribune Publishing's Virginia media operations, including the Virginian Pilot and the Daily Press. She has also served as the publisher and editor-in-chief of Tribune Publishing's Daily Press Media Group. An alumnus of the University of South Carolina, Marisa has previously held leadership positions with news organizations in Florida, Delaware, and Ohio. Marisa is currently a member of the News Advisory Council of an international nonprofit called the Trust Project, which helps news organizations develop and foster transparency and trust with audience. She is past president of the Virginia Press Association and served a 4-year term on Virginia's Freedom of Information Advisory Council. She is currently the vice chair of the Girl Scouts of the Colonial Coast and a member of Impact 100 Greater Peninsula. Please join me in welcoming Marisa Porto.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That is a very long entry, but I appreciate it. It's been happy to join all of you today from Hampton University. We are glad to have you here today. Welcome again to the 757 Vision Series. We have been doing this over the last few months, and we are so glad to have you here today joining us. And as Bob and Sarah said, today we are going to talk about bridging the divide, broadband expansion in the 757. We have a group of experts on this topic with us today. They include Bob Crum, who is the Executive Director of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Dr. John Caggiano, I hope I'm saying that right, the Deputy Superintendent of Hampton City Schools. J.D. Myers is the Senior Vice President and Regional Manager for Cox, Virginia. So thank you all for joining us today for this great discussion. And we're going to start today with Bob Crum, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about the issues of broadband in the area. Bob, before we begin, I know you have a presentation for our group today. Before we begin, I would ask, let's start with the scene setter. Can you tell me why it's so important for the 757 to expand broadband.
Well, yes, thank you. And really look forward to our conversation today with great community partners. I think the intro that Cox Communication provided, frankly, hit the nail on the head, right? We've learned so much over the last year, over the last 5 years, of the importance of technology, broadband, and fiber for our region to compete with other metropolitan regions. I think that need is hit home to all of us personally at home and with our businesses and with our organizations, even more over the past year. You know, I sometimes kid JD, you know, Cox Communication did this before broadband was cool, right? it's the thing everybody's talking about now that experts like JD and his team have been at this for a while. I think as we think about Bob McKenna's comment, we don't want to see a rerun of 2008. When we come out of this pandemic, we want to be positioned for the sprint economically. And I think setting the framework for how we come out of this, I think fiber and broadband is going to be that foundation that's going to lead the way for us.
That's exciting way to start the program. I know you have a presentation for us. Did you want to start and share that with us today?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed here. I just have some graphics that hopefully will help us through. If I did that correctly, hopefully in a moment, that will be on your screen. Marissa, did that look like it came up okay?
It did, thank you.
Okay, and and my volume's okay? Everybody can hear me well?
You're doing fine, thank you.
Well, I'm gonna go very quickly because I want the partners on the panel, they're the experts in this conversation, but I wanna give a little bit of background on what we are doing as the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission to work with our 17 local governments and really are going to need to work with our private sector partners to really set the stage for opportunity and what we call 757 Connects. So I'm just going to run through a little bit what we're doing now with the regional network ring, what the location of that looks like, the timeline and expected delivery date on the south side, and then the peninsula, which I know you're very interested in, and why we think this is really a benefit to our region and why we think we can be successful. So I know that seems like a lot, but I promise I'll try to move quickly. And I've got to be honest, Marissa, you know, I'm a community planner here. I'm not a technology guy, right? So that when the chief information officers and the city managers and college and universities started coming to me, I came to Hampton Roads in 2015. And again, my job is to work with 17 local governments on things like transportation projects and housing and water and sea level rise and regional planning. So when they came to me and said, Bob, we have these subsea cables landing in Virginia Beach, and this could be an opportunity for our region, I have to confess that I didn't quite understand, okay, what does that mean for us, right? But what's really interesting is these subsea cables that have come over the ocean from Spain and have come up from South America and even from South Africa. Think of these as incredibly fast fiber. There have been some that have said that you could take every movie ever made in the world and publish it in every language that exists and pump them over the ocean in a minute. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but if it's close, that's impressive. So I think that the opportunity was, okay, how do we tie into these subsea cables that are coming ashore? And how do we spread this ultra fast service around our region working with our partners? So our region, through the 17 governments, through the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, have adopted this concept. Our vision is a fiber optic network ring that will connect our entire 757 region. That plan begins with the construction of a Southside fiber ring on the south side. We're starting on the south side since that's closest to the subsea cables that we can connect into. After we do that, we connect across the tunnels, we build a similar ring on the peninsula, and then we move westward. A plan that we really think we can get constructed in full by 2025, if we can work quickly and efficiently. So this is the first phase. Our 5 Southside localities form the broadband authority to get started. That authority can be expanded over time as the project expands. They all contributed money to do 30% design work. They've now completed design for a Southside fiber ring that is up to 60%, which means if we can get funding, we can build it now. And they are working hard to determine the best approach to build that. And I'll give you a little more information on that in a minute. But what we want to stress is what we are doing is building an information highway. And the best way to think about that for our audience is think of the national highway system without secondary roads. We're not building the secondary roads. We're basically building the interstate system, the backbone of the fiber network in our region, our community. Now, I'll get a little out of my area here. Fortunately, we have chief information officers and consultants working on this, but our digital highway is going to have 288 digital strands. So think of them as long, thin strands of pure glass, about the diameter of a human hair. You know, what's being designed is we're going to have 8 strands for cities. They're going to support city operations. We're going to have strands dedicated for public safety. We're going to have strands dedicated for education. And we're going to have strands for economic growth and private providers to utilize to ride our information highway and provide the last mile service. Our Southside fiber ring is going to cost us $24 million to construct. We also have operation and maintenance costs of about $760,000 a year. And that's the result of some of the work, the detailed work we've done. So the journey we've been on very quickly, this really started in 2017. We formed our authority in November 2019 and really made a smart move in June 2020. Frankly, from 2017 to 2020, this was another responsibility that I had in my portfolio. But this past June, we hired an executive director, and that is Stephen DeBerry, who's the retired Chief Information Officer from the city of Norfolk. Now we have somebody on this full time, and it's starting to pay dividends for us. What the work ahead looks like is we believe in March, we're going to make a decision on how best to finance and construct this fiber ring. Do we do it as 5 Southside cities as a starting point? Do we do it with a public-private partnership? Do we do some hybrid of that? Our board members are working very hard at that at the moment. We think construction of the Southside fiber ring can be in 2021-22. As soon as that starts, we're going to reach over the peninsula and begin the design of the peninsula ring. And I would hope that the peninsula ring, if we could stay on schedule, could be completed in 2025, and we would have our interconnected system. So we're balancing a lot of goals with this. You know, public sector goals, private sector goals, colleges and university, those are all things we need to think about. You know, how we build this, how we finance it, how we manage it matters, right? And I think that our authority has taken a hard look at all options to make certain we make the best decision. But Marissa, this is really our goal. And Cox Communication, again, nailed it in the introduction, right? Think about our community becoming that smart region, using this technology to address our challenges and opportunities. And I have some of them listed here. A lot of them hit home, but just to bounce through some of those very quickly. Using this ultra-fast ring to improve the interoperability of our emergency response system, our communication among our 17 local governments. Using this ring to help us navigate flooding and sea level rise, right? Last week, our commission approved a sensor program where we're going to launch a pilot program of sensors that are going to be located on the roadways and are going to connect the ways. And if you're driving down the road and your road's flooded, we're hoping that now we can give you a heads up that you don't want to drive down that road and we can redirect you, right? But if you really get enough sensors out there, it's this type of fiber ring that can support and drive that type of sensor program. Autonomous vehicles. I'll admit I'm a transportation planner, but I'm going to be a little shaky about getting an autonomous vehicle. And if we do, we want ultra-fast fiber to drive and support that. And really growing industries in the 757. If you think about financial services on the global market, cybersecurity, data transfer, medical and bioscience, and the ecosystem for business investment. We really think this is the type of network that we need to support those goals. We think that here in the 757, we live in the greatest metropolitan region, if not in the country, definitely on the East Coast, right? That's why we're all here. And now in this world of telework, we really think people are going to live here and can work anywhere. And our regional network ring is going to support them. You know, what's interesting when you look pre-COVID, this is how we were thinking about our workforce, right? Pre-COVID, we were thinking that by 2030, 50% of the workforce might be remote or distributed. Now, when the chambers and the Alliance surveys our businesses, they're telling us 50% of their workforce is going to be remote by 2025. So, you know, the last year has changed things. We think our network ring can help make a case to prevent BRAC. We want to keep our bases here. If BRAC returns, we know the Navy wants 30% of their workforce to telework. We're going to have the network to support that and keep our military installations here. What we're talking about is really future-proofing the 757. So just to wind down, our network ring has unanimous support of all 17 localities that make up the 757 region. We're not the only one. This is a map that shows there's over 500 community broadband networks across the country. You know some of these places, and of course, some of these are our competitors, but these are the places that we want to be able to compete with, and we strongly believe we can. We've been recognized nationally in concept. Our region was the grand prize winner for the 2018 Smart Infrastructure Challenge. We were just at a concept stage then, but we're really getting to the point of how you build it. So in March, we're going to be looking at private ownership of the ring versus a public-private partnership. The good news is all the options work. Our elected officials just have to determine in March which is the best approach. What's next is we'll make that decision in March. We hope to begin construction on the Southside fiber ring in the fall. When we start that construction, we're going to quickly jump to the peninsula to work on the design and layout of that ring. So Marissa, I hope I didn't take too long. I just wanted to give that introductory information and look forward to the comments from the other panelists. Hello?
I think you're still there, Bob. I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
JD? Okay.
I'm here, Bob. This is Bob McKenna. Maurice, are you on?
Okay.
All right, can you unshare your screen then, Bob? And we'll just...
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Maurice, are you on? Okay. Then I'm going to ask some questions until Maurice is back on. She might be having some problems. Okay, thanks very much for that, Bob. That was a great stage setter and kind of prepared us for the rest of the panelists. So I'm going to go right over to John Caggiano first. And John, can you, so one of the reasons we're talking about this today is the educational challenges that we've had in the last 11 or 12 months, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about what those challenges were and how you were able to transform in the short term to meet those challenges? From a connectivity standpoint, of course.
Sure thing. Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you all this afternoon, and certainly representing our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Jeffrey Smith. So, you know, back to almost a year ago, we knew that roughly 19,000 students in the city of Hampton, and we knew approximately 25% of our students did not have access to high-speed internet. And so, you know, when the governor made the decision and schools were closed for an extended period of time last school year, it put us in a bit of a bind from an equity standpoint in order to address all families' needs. And so it prohibited us in moving forward in really a systematic way to ensure that all students were getting a quality education at the time. So one of the first things we had to tackle was that access issue. So for us, it was working closely with Cox Communications. They have their Connect to Compete program, and for families based on a certain income level who qualify. What we did was we used some CARES Act funds. So, and we served as the middleman as well. So we would help families sign up with Cox to, Connect to Compete. And then also through December 31st of 2020, we actually were willing to foot the internet bill for families who qualified for this program. So that was one way we addressed the connectivity. The second way was applying for grants and using additional CARES funds to secure MiFis and Wi-Fis, because, you know, in some of our families with larger numbers of students, even with high-speed internet access, if you've got multiple kids Zooming at the same time, we found that was an issue as well. We are very fortunate in the city of Hampton. I know Mayor Tuck is on the call, very collaborative working relationship between the city council and the school board. And a number of years ago, our city council, there's I believe a 2-cent dedicated tax for technology innovation, particularly supporting a one-to-one program. And so prior to the pandemic, we were already in a position where every student in grades 5 through 12 had a device that they were able to take home, a Chromebook. We used CARES Fund Acts to expand that to pre-K through 12. So we were well equipped there. Bob, I can continue talking, but I'll pause for a second. Any follow-ups on your part in reference to anything I've shared thus far, or?
Yeah, so that was great, and in describing the short-term response and how you guys pivoted to make this 12 months as successful as you possibly could. Let me ask you to hold that thought for a second, though. I want to go over to JD. JD, Cox has been a fantastic community partner throughout this pandemic. John mentioned Connect to Compete, but can you talk to us about what Cox has done to support their customers and community throughout this difficult period, including obviously the educational perspective?
Hey, Bob, do you mind if I call a little bit of an audible and go backwards a little bit to comment on a little bit of the things that Bob Crum said about the transatlantic fiber? I think I can add some color into that, if you don't mind.
You got it. That sounds good. But then I'm going to hold you to that last question too.
No doubt about it. That's great. So
right.
I think it's important, and I think Bob knows this, but everybody may not know that Cox was also instrumental in kind of bringing the transatlantic fiber to Hampton Roads. If you look at it this way, we looked at this as a unique partnership to help bring a dream that Bob was discussing to a reality by working together to help facilitate this with Mid-Atlantic Broadband. So we took and developed with them an open access fiber, which is now the new transatlantic fiber cable system. This partnership is going to allow public and private sectors and entities across the Commonwealth to access this new critical infrastructure. So I would say that Cox and Mid-Atlantic Broadband are like setting up the region to take advantage of this next generation network, allowing businesses to have this super, and I would say super high broadband access for any business that has needs to have connectivity points outside of the United States, connecting them to the rest of the world. And I think that's the good news story here that we need to make sure that we tell. And I just wanted to kind of add on to what Bob has said, because I think he had a great introduction. Thank you for letting me do that.
That's good. No, that was perfect. Thank you very much. So back to that question I asked you before, but I'm also handing moderator back over to Marisa, who apparently is not on Cox.
My apologies.
Don't say anything, Marisa.
Thanks for taking over for me, Bob. In classic virtual reality moment there, I had a little bit of a technical issue. So getting back to our questions, I think the next question on the agenda would be for Dr. Caggiano, who's in the house, and I guess I would ask you, given the context of the conversation that we've been having with Bob and with JD, can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from your end is in the educational system?
So Marisa, you missed that. We already went to John once.
Ah, okay.
So right. he talked about short-term response, and then I went back over to JD and said, okay, can you talk about what Cox has done to support the community? And then he punted and asked to address something that Bob Crum had said. So this is a great panel, but let's go over to JD and have him address Connect to Compete and what Cox has done to support the community. And that's the only other question you missed. So
all right, great, thank you.
Go ahead, JD.
All right, Bob, so I'm going to try to follow the rules now. I'm going to try to stay in sight. So look, like any other successful business, I mean, very similar to what you were discussing, we took action in the short term to respond to things that are happening now, trying to while plan at the same time, long term. One of the things that you heard and was just discussed was John was discussing was Connect to Compete and what we did there and the benefits of that program. And John talked about one of the challenges that Connect to Compete had earlier on when we initially found out that different individuals had to kind of work through this Connect to Compete when you had so many people working in and out of your home and so many kids going to school at the same time, and it became a speed issue. So we really kind of worked through that, and we bumped that speed up from 15 megabits up to 25 megabits, and now it's sitting at 50 megabits to solve that dilemma that John was talking about, to ensure that you could have so many different kids on the network streaming at the same time, having their schoolwork done, and still be effective. So that was one of the things we really did to button up Connect to Compete. Another great example of what we did is we kind of invested in network enhancements. And when we talk about network enhancements, we talk about network enhancements, things that you may need down the road. A prime example would be when everybody started working out of their home in March 13th, which is right about March 13th of last year, almost a year ago today, that happened overnight. So if you think about this analogy, think about you being a grocery store in a community, and you're a community grocery store, and all of a sudden you're providing services to everybody around. You've been there for 20 years. In our case, we've been here for 40 plus years, 40 years providing services all around. And all of a sudden, all the fellow grocery stores ran out of inventory, and everybody in all other adjacent communities come to you for groceries. And now you can't fulfill the needs of your present customers, but you can't fulfill the needs of your current customers unless you do something dramatically different right off the bat. And that's what we saw in March 13th when everything took place and everybody started working out of their homes, and all this homework began to happen from kids going and working out of their homes, and adults working out of their homes all happened at the same time. It was like a switch just flipped. And we learned and found out that we got 2 years of growth on our network. 2 years happened in a matter of 5 days. 2 years of growth, 2 years of internet traffic. The good news for us is we kind of built our network with 2 years in mind. We do 2-year windows. So we try to anticipate what's going to be needed 2 years ahead, and we build to that point. Well, it was all absorbed in a matter of weeks, and we had to do something different. So from a network advancement perspective, we really kind of shifted gears. And we shifted gears, pulled all our resource in. Thank goodness that all our employees bulk of our network and engineering employees and construction employees are all full-time employees, and the contractors we have are long-term relationships. So we pulled everybody in and did an additional 2 years worth of upgrades in 90 days. During that period of time to accommodate all that traffic, because we all assumed when all these things were going to happen that they were going to be short term, 30, 60, 90 days. Nobody assumed that we'd be sitting here almost a year later, still having almost the bulk of the country still working out of their homes, and a lot of kids still still going to school out of their homes too, even though they're transitioning back. And me as a family that has educators in it, I know how important that is. So it allowed us to do things completely different. So if you look in your community and you look at Peninsula, for example, it's one of the communities that we're constantly doing upgrades on, constantly building out our network. If I would sit down and just walk you through the investments we made, we've got roughly about 16,000 miles of network plant in Virginia. And roughly about in 2020, even during the pandemic, we built 30 miles of new network plant just in the peninsula. That's just in the peninsula, 30 miles during this pandemic. So I can tell you that these are the things that we have done and continue to do to ensure that we overcome some of the challenges that have taken place in the marketplace. The blessing is on all of this, our network took that punch and is still standing strong. We're still providing services. And now all that traffic we have on our network is now what we call BAU, business as usual. So we've adjusted our network to manage that traffic like it's what we had long before March 13th. I know it's a long way of answering your question, but there was a lot I wanted to put into that answer.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you just moved forward with now with business as usual. Where does that put, in your 2 years ahead of the plan that you had, where does that put, what's next for you all, especially as we move into this new normal and we go back to business as normal? How does the company sort of make sure that now you have to go back to your strategic plan and figure out what's next on the horizon?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, Maria, because I'm assuming your internet just went out again. So I'll answer it this way. First and foremost, Cox operates on what we call a long-range plan. And the minimum we operate on is 3-year windows. So this wasn't really a big adjustment for us. That's step one. Step two, if you just look at the investments we make as a company in our network, in the past 3 years, and remember this, and you heard Sarah say this earlier, we are a family-owned private company who invest every day in our network. In the past 3 years, we've invested $500 million, that's with a B, $500 million. So basically that's $500 million we've invested in our network. And in the next 5 years, I'm going to invest $10 billion in that network nationwide that's going to continue to drive investments. We are building our network now to anticipate things that you're going to need in the next 5 years. And for us, that means taking you from what you have today, which is the ability to have in your home, 1 gig service. And when I say 1 gig, the majority of individuals who have in their home and the computers and laptops they have, it can't operate at speeds up to 1 gig. Truly, your Wi-Fi cannot do that today, most of you. But when businesses left their offices and moved into their homes, some of these businesses could operate at that speed. So thank goodness, bringing their business to their home, we were prepared and ready in the entire state, everywhere we offer service, in every neighborhood we offer service. Everybody has access to 1 gig across the board. So people all had that. There's a lot of upgrades that took place to handle that. Now we're operating at the next level. We are doing construction now. So if you see those big bucket trucks with Cox on the side of them in your neighborhoods, and I've seen them in many of your neighborhoods in the peninsula, we're now upgrading the system again to what we call NT 2.0 enhancements, which is preparing us for the next generation, which is 10 gig. So over the next several years, you're going to see us transition you into 10 gig. And you'll have people like me who drive a lot of demand to their network. In my own home alone, I have 60 Connect devices. What does that mean? I got 60 things in my house that are pumping in and out to my internet, and I operate off 1 gig right now, and I'm still not operating that at full capacity. So it'll tell you how much more planning we're doing to be well ahead of your needs in the future. And somewhere during this discussion, I'm going to tell you what 10 gig brings to you and what it allows you to do. And a lot of it goes to what Bob Crum was talking about augmented reality and the things he was talking about autonomous cars and things like that. I'll bring you into a little insight on how that's going to interconnect into your home. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Why don't you tell us how that's going to? I want to use this opportunity to say, tell us how it's going to come into our home, because I want to get back to some of the conversation with Bob.
Awesome. So let's do that. So we were preparing and doing this during the pandemic. We were out still doing construction. So just right in Virginia alone, we invested $15 million into our network to start getting you ready for 10G. So 10G is not like 5G. Now 5G, you hear a lot about out there in the marketplace about the new cell phones. I mean, I've got one right now, my own 5G phone, and 5G is a whole different animal. That's 5th generation, which gives you potential speed, if everything works out well, when we get to that point, which I think we will by the end of this year, sometime next year, of being 1 gig on your phone. So this is 10 gig to your house, which interconnects your own house and puts you in what's called augmented reality. So if you've never Googled that word, you should Google augmented reality. So what that basically does in a nutshell, it takes things in your home, the normal things you have, let's say a kitchen, a countertop, a table, and it will superimpose things on them to make you feel like you're in another environment. For example, you could be sitting in your home having Thanksgiving dinner, which we're all hopeful we're going to be able to do that with friends and family. But if you had 10G services at this time this year in your home, you could be sitting at home having dinner, and physically you could see everyone sitting around the table, and they could all physically be located in their homes all across the country or all across the world. You could interact, you could share, you could have conversation, dialogue, you could see how they're dressed, see they could be physically sitting at the table, having a total interaction like they're there. It's almost like something you'd see on some kind of Star Wars image. Or if you're watching TV and you see some of these next generation things you see on TV when you're looking at the Matrix, and they're pulling down and dragging images in front of their face and swiping screens in front of the face. You see that on shows today. That's augmented reality. That will be something that will be available in your home, as well as your car. And we're talking about that car that Bob was talking about, fully autonomous car, will be connected into your home. So it'll be notifying your home, hey, Bob is 10 minutes away from the house. Bob is 5 minutes away from the house. Bob pulls in the driveway. The door unlocks. Bob walks in. That's because there's interconnectivity between your car and your house, all part of this new augmented reality, which will then bring you into the futuristic version of what we're offering today, which we call not the distant future, but the very near future.
This is exciting stuff. We're actually teaching teaching augmented reality here at the journalism school. So my students here are in that same space with you. So I would like to move just back to John and say, sort of given the context of what JD has mentioned here, how does that look in an educational space?
Certainly, you know, I mean, it's exciting to think about from a teacher's lens, the doors that will open from a teaching and learning standpoint. You know, we're unique in Hampton in that all 4 of our high schools, for example, are what we call wall-to-wall academies. So every student chooses an academy at the end of their freshman year. And part of that program is really to partner with local businesses, for example, or those in the region, or those where the jobs are, and come in to rewrite, really co-write a curriculum with us. And so, you know, in the Academy's model, the opportunity to incorporate a lot of that relevant real-world learning experience is exciting. You know, we're already seeing some creativity along those lines with, we've purchased a product called the Swivel, S-W-I-V-L robot. And for grades 6 through 12, we're using the Swivel to assist in our method of delivery in this hybrid learning model. So, you know, in 6 through 12, beginning on March 8th, for example, for certain grade levels and all grade levels by the March 15th, it's this concurrent hybrid model where in-person learners and virtual learners are engaging in the same classroom. So if I make that, and we're right now, students will have that opportunity to remain at home for those who wish to do so. But for those who are in-person learners, being able to collaborate with virtual learners simultaneously. And that robot, we've got mics around the classroom, the teacher is mic'd, and then the opportunity again. So things like that, that speed is very exciting, and a lot of possibilities as far as implications for teaching and learning and opening some doors.
This is a chance for us to get back to you, Bob, and talk a little bit more about the project itself. Talk a little bit about, you know, sort of tell us the plans for a little bit more about the plans for that Southside ring, how that's going to play out, and what the peninsula can expect.
Yeah, great question. So what you're going to see is an important decision be made. You know, is it public ownership and financing? Is it public-private sector arrangement? Is it some hybrid of that approach? We're pushing to get that decision made very, very quickly here. I think what the peninsula can expect is once we can get that decision made, then we have something for you to connect into. We're going to tie, and JD did an excellent job of explaining how they really made this an open access system. So now what happened is Virginia Beach built the equivalent of what we call a carrier neutral hotel that these cables plugged into. We can connect our fiber system into that. We're going to do that wing on the south side, and what the peninsula can expect is us coming over and say, let's start planning how that connects. The big thing I want to stress, when you think about our project, we want to enable, not compete. We are not in the business of providing service, right? That's not what we do. Cox Communication and others do that incredibly well. That's their space, right? So we're hoping that we can build an information highway that people can ride. And I think that the big thing that I want to say about our project as well, you know, so what does that look like? And if I may, Marissa, there was a question, and the question was, so how are we messaging this, right? And I think the thing I'd like to say is to follow up again on some things that John and JD said, right? You know, again, you know, going back to Bob, the community planner, the first thing I was thinking are data centers. And data centers are great. There's nothing wrong with data centers, right? But if any of you have been through a data center, there's a lot of powerful equipment in there. There's not a lot of people needed. There's not a ton of jobs there, right? What we want to message is this is the opportunity. Take everything JD said and everything that our education institutions are saying. This is the chance for us to brand the 757 region as a center of innovation, right? Think about, when you think about some of the augmented reality, the firms, the high-tech firms that do computer simulation and modeling, the high-tech firms that bring the smartest people to the 757 to help us solve the problem of sea level rise using this technology. The smartest people that allow us to augment, we're building the most sophisticated chips in the world right here in Hampton Roads, right? Think of the spin-off off of that by providing this technological backbone. It's those type of things that I think are what our dream is for this project, right? It's data centers are great, but I just encourage us to think more broadly about these tech companies, the smartest people coming to our region. This could be an incredible reshaping of the brand for Hampton Roads and the 757. And that's what I think we're really excited about. And I think the question we got, what's the plan for the messaging? We're working on that because we've got to get out there with that. We've got to get out there with that strong. It's time for this region not to be taking a backseat to Austin and Nashville and Raleigh-Durham, right? We don't need to take a backseat to anybody. And I think this can help us with that.
That's great. That's great. I guess I'd like to go back here to JD and say, I know that Cox has been doing all this work. Has there been any has there been any discussion about leveraging federal or state efforts or resources in any way? Do you know of any of that on your end?
You know, that's a very good question, and we've been really working hard on leveraging federal and state funds as ways to reach more people. I mean, there's a third-party program that I think we've heard Bob mention just a few minutes ago as he was talking about CARES Act funds, and that infusion of state and federal funding has surely made a difference. I mean, absolutely made a difference for us to get out to more unserved areas. In addition to CARES dollars and supporting education and student connectivity, we also were successful leveraging some of those CARES dollars to reach some previously unserved areas too. I mean, think about it this way. Most families in Hampton Roads have an option for service, but some of these rural pockets are very difficult for any one technology to extend their network due to the significant cost. And if you're on the west coast of Virginia, then you're talking about going through the mountains and the terrain. If you're dealing with things in northern Virginia, you're talking about going through a very highly dense populated area. If you're talking about areas here on the east part of Virginia, now you're talking about going through large gaps of area where there's no one there, or going through wetlands or under railroad tracks. So it just puts some unique challenges in. And this money was really, really helpful and helped us work on a special project we had in James City County to reach homes with, school-age children that were previously, unserved, totally unserved. And many of these homes were quite a distance from our existing network. And it took a significant investment, not just from us, but from the county and support of the CARE funds to get there. And so we're constantly looking for ways to partner to get things done like that. And there's also programs out there like the Virginia Telecommunication Initiatives that's out there in short to provide broadband expansion projects in the Commonwealth that we've also tapped into. And we were one of the first recipients of a grant in 2016. So we did an expansion area in Gloucester County, which was another unserved area. So, and that project allowed us to reach another 120 homes and businesses. So I could go on and on and on with these projects that we're involved in now that we've done, that it's a label using state and local funds to reach these unserved areas.
That's great. Good opportunities for people here in our community. I guess this would get me a chance to go back to you, John, and ask you, given what you've heard, how has the school system, what are you thinking about from the standpoint of short-term and long-term transformations in this virtual broadband space?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on listening to JD and Bob. One, the rural piece, and speaking with, there are 8 school divisions, for example, in Region 2, and speaking with some colleagues who are in more remote settings, the equity piece there. And so they have struggled during the pandemic when it comes to access, and not only for students, but for staff as well. So that has been an issue. School divisions like our neighbors right across the water, Isle of Wight County, for example. For us, I like what Sarah said earlier as far as that term, and I hadn't heard it before, that technology accelerator. And that's one thing certainly the pandemic has done. You know, where I talked in my opening comments in reference to access and somewhat, you know, addressing digital divide. And so for us, quite some time ago in our city, the digital divide was the device itself. And so, you know, we're in a position now with pre-K through 12. They have devices, internet access. We're close to 100% of our families have high-speed internet access. And so really the second digital divide and what we've been dealing with is how do we incorporate into our curriculum opportunities, particularly for low-income families when we look at our research, that second digital divide of leveling the playing field and helping build student skill sets, because the technology is just the device. And so we've worked even for the last couple of years really embedding into our curriculum opportunity. We know if it's in our curriculum, it gets done in the classroom, embedding into our curriculum opportunities for students to be well-versed, for example, in the use of Google Suites applications. And so for us, we're spending a lot of time on not as much the device now that we know we have the device, we have connectivity, but really helping students set them up for success once they walk across the graduation stage. So a lot of us is looking at other applications for the technology. I mentioned that swivel device, the robot device. We're already seeing creative uses of that. I mentioned the academies, for example. We had a high school science teacher the other day, biology teacher, working on the periodic table. And she said, you know what, it would be awesome if I took this swivel device, which I can stick an iPad or a phone in it, bring it out to a local trade shop where they make neon signs. And she was talking about the periodic table of elements. And so she put a mic around the tradesman. She had a mic, she had a swivel device, and was hands-on explaining how he uses heat to bend the metal and whatnot. And so just lots of opportunities we see for bringing relevance into the classroom.
So exciting to hear these ideas. I do have a couple of questions from the audience, so I would ask, and this one is from Judith Brown. She asks, what about the Eastern Shore? Are we expecting the Eastern Shore to look to Maryland for their broadband expansion action? I think, Bob, you want to try that one?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Of course, Eastern Shore is outside of my 17 localities, but I will say that they've set up their own broadband authority. Eastern Shore has connected across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. And I think that if they would ever, you know, I think once we can get our network set up in a way that we're comfortable with here, I'm sure either our authority or Cox Communication would be happy to have conversations with them. I'll let JD speak to that, but I think there's some framework set up there where opportunities for collaboration could exist, but they have set up their own authority on the Eastern Shore area.
JD, do you want to add to that?
I'll just add briefly. I was looking at the question and trying to figure out where that was located. So I was texting my people going, where is that? Somewhere out in the neck somewhere, where is it? So we were trying to figure out where that actually is. I mean, it's one of those things where entities, it's unfortunately that you just can't build and construct anywhere. You've got to get licensing. You then have to get approval from the city council. You have to go through all that process to get a franchise agreement to build anywhere. So I just have to determine where that is, if that's something that we have access to, and then begin to explore it. So that's going to be a question we're going to have to answer later to see if it's a possibility. But I do see a map that just popped up on my screen, and I know, yeah, I see where it is. So I know I don't have any infrastructure out that far right now. So it's something we'll have to look into, and I'll just circle back with Bob and we'll figure out what's next steps for us on that one.
It's good that you can answer a specific question from a specific audience member. That's fabulous. We have another question, and it is actually for you, JD, and it's where do you see the future of Cox in 10 years as far as employment opportunities or gaps based on all of this change?
Well, I'd hate to go down this path and answer this question this way, but I'm going to answer part of it. First and foremost, Cox is, no different than any other company. I think a lot of times individuals think about us, if you listen to the dates, I think Sarah threw a year out to all of you, and she said 1890. I'm going to make sure I don't misquote the date. She said basically 1898. So Cox has been around a very long time, and we've been at Hampton Roads for well over 40 years, maybe 42 years now. So when you talk about a company like us, we have evolved from just being a cable provider, which people used to remember us as Cox Cable, to now an actual multimedia company. I mean, if you think about it this way, Cox is in so many different business ventures now in a very diversified portfolio. We've got a lot of things about conservation. I mean, we own a company in the state, and I can say it's Bright Farms, and a lot of people don't know that, in this state, that's a space that we're in, which is utilizing renewable sources to provide fresh vegetables to some of the supermarkets around here. That's one of the things that we do. Cox provides mulch to Lowe's. You don't know that either. You wouldn't pull a bag out and see Cox's name on it, but Cox designs and develops mulch from reusable material, and that's sold in Lowe's. We also provide alarm services, most of you know, home security services for residential services, but we also provide full-blown alarm services for businesses. We actually have cloud services now with one of our companies called Rapid Scale. We also are in the medical entity, in the medical space. So we have a company that actually is in that space that focuses on providing that extension when you're at home and you need to be connected to your doctor, which everybody is now. Everybody is now. So it's companies called Trapalo. We have that. So we are really heavily leveraged in a lot of different organizations, a lot of different businesses, as well as, this is a little known fact that I'm gonna share with all of you. We have 0 jobs that pay below minimum wage. 0 jobs that pay below minimum wage. We don't even have jobs that pay at minimum wage. So I can tell you, we are one of the higher compensated organizations, and we hire, before March 13th, we were hiring on average in Virginia, roughly about 60 to 65 people a month. Now, during the pandemic, we're still hiring, but that number resembles more like 35 people a month. So we are still hiring, still growing, still diversifying our portfolio. And I love the fact that Bob brought up autonomous vehicles. Well, we are a heavy investor in the battery development of those autonomous vehicles. So it tells you how diversified our portfolio is. And all of you know about a company called AutoTrader. That's a whole owned subsidiary of Cox Communications. We own AutoTrader, and Mannheim, the largest car auction in the world. And all these entities, some of these entities are all based in Virginia. You just don't hear about them with the name Cox on them because they have their own names. So they're part of Cox Enterprises, our parent company. So when I talk about the future of Cox, continuing to evolve and grow, continuing to find ways that we can make it better for the next generation, from a Cox Communication perspective, we need to continue to expand these public and private partnerships. How do we continue to do that? So how do we have a bigger reach in these unserved areas? Anytime I hear someone who does not have broadband access, when John talked about that, it actually legitimately turns my stomach, because I'm a firm believer that no one should not have broadband. I mean, I look at it like this: you have air, you have water, and you have broadband. Those are 3 life essentials that everyone should have: air, water, and broadband. And anytime I hear that, I try to find a way that we can help fix those unserved areas. So anytime we can find more partnerships, any more federal funding, there's state funding that's available that we can collaborate and build out to those areas, any collaboration we can do with any other entities, any other telecommunication companies that allows us both to expand our reach into an area, I'm open to do. So it's a long way of answering. Our future is bright, but our future is diversified.
That's a really good, that could be a really good marketing statement for the 757, right? Air, water, and broadband, which gets me, I'm going to kick it back to you, Bob, because this is a good opportunity for you to maybe talk a little bit more about what we can expect, what you think we can expect from a jobs perspective. I know you got into it a little bit from a technology standpoint, but, and JD talked about, his company itself, but maybe you have something to offer in this area too.
Yeah, I think, so I've been a regional planner for about 35 years. So, as part of my, I geek out studying other metropolitan areas. That's what I do, right? And when you look at these other metropolitan areas that are successful, if you think about it, a lot of people try to promote one thing, but the truth of the matter is it's a host and variety of things that come together that all make these areas just explode economically, right? So if I could, Marissa, to answer your question, I'd like to talk about a number of things and how I really believe what we're talking about today is the last missing piece, okay? So what's not known by a lot of people right now is that in Hampton Roads, we have $5.3 billion of transportation highway improvements under construction today. It's happening all around you. The I-64 Peninsula, we've got two phases of that project completed. The last one's under construction. You got HRBT under construction, which is the largest project in the history of Virginia. You got 264 interchange, high-rise bridge, 64 Southside. That's the second largest interstate highway construction project of any metropolitan region in the country. And we're paying for that with no federal money, all local regional tax dollars. And my chair, Mayor Donnie Tuck, is on the call. Under the leadership of Mayor Tuck, these 17 localities have just really broken new ground, no pun intended, with regional collaboration around this effort. You combine this with the 757 having one of the strongest, if not the strongest port on the East Coast. And then you look at the fact that now we are positioning ourselves with our port facilities to support an offshore wind industry, offshore wind turbines happening up and down the East Coast. We're positioned perfectly to service those wind turbines and be the supply chain for those jobs. And then think about some of the things JD was talking about, how fiber can support all of that, right? And all that technology. You add to that our military, our shipbuilding, the fact that our localities are collaborating around preparing economic development sites for development. And now you drape over everything we've talked about today with fiber and broadband. Just the investments JD referenced, the things we're hoping to do with our fiber network. So Marissa, I don't have specific numbers, and I'd probably be foolish to say this is the type of jobs I think we can create, but I will say this. I think we're armed now with everything we need to really, I don't think we've told our story very well in the past. And I think that's got to change. And I think now we're armed with everything we need to tell that story, to be aggressively recruiting a strong workforce and recruit those job creation opportunities to our community. So what can we expect, Marissa? I'm hopeful that in the next 3 to 5 years, you see us pivot to leveraging all these assets, right? You know, maybe the 757 will not only be known as the port to the world related to moving in freight, but frankly, we're set up now to be the port to the world from the technology standpoint, and that's pretty exciting.
That sounds very exciting. It gives everyone who is listening to this a real sense of where we're going as a community. I know that John actually has a hard stop at 1:10, so I wanted to thank him and say we appreciate your joining us for this conversation and for being patient with my internet access issues today. So thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you very much, Marissa. Thanks, Bob, as well. And it was great to listen to Bob and JD. And again, from my lens as an educator, it's exciting to think about the future and where we're heading, and you know, making some lemonade out of lemons, if you will, given the pandemic, and really, as Sarah said, the technology accelerator and spurring some things along. So great to be with you all today. Before I sign off, I'll type my email in the chat box. So if anyone has questions related to education in or outside of Hampton, don't hesitate to contact me. But thank you all for your time today.
Thanks so much, John. We still have some questions, so I'd like to get back to Bob and say there's a question in the chat that is about, it says, can you share the top pros and cons for a public-private partnership in this expansion effort?
Yeah, so let me
Bob and JD. So
absolutely. Maybe I'll start off, JD, and then look forward to your perspectives. So what I'm going to try to report, Marissa, is what our elected officials' conversation has been. And these are in public meetings, so this is fully transparent. So what are the advantages of a public-private partnership? Well, as you can imagine, when you're talking about $24 million today in a COVID pandemic environment to build the fiber ring, localities are being very careful with investments. That's it's not a lot of money compared to transportation, but $24 million is a lot of public money. And some of our localities just don't have those resources. There are some private sector entities that are willing to collaborate with us and could help us with the upfront capital costs for construction in exchange for certain arrangements when that fiber backbone system is built. So I think that's one advantage of a public-private partnership. Another is that private entities, this is what they do. This is their expertise, right? They plan and they operate. So I think there's a lot of advantages there. Some of our elected officials, though, wonder and really think, you know, there could be opportunity for public-private partnership, that maybe it's in the best interest of our region if the public sector does finance it and build it. And what they've said, and I'll quote them, is, you know, this is going to be an incredible asset. Do we want to concede control or interest in that asset, right? And, you know, it's not that they're concerned about those things today, but what does that picture look like tomorrow in 5 or 10 years? Those are the things they have to balance. And then there's others that say that there's got to be a sweet spot in the middle of all that that really works for everybody. You know, clearly for this to work, it's got to benefit the public. It's got to benefit the private sector. If it's not win-win, it's not going to work. So Marissa, JD probably has some.
That's a great segue to JD.
So and thank you very much. And that was phenomenal, Bob. I have to kind of, I got to weigh my hats, right? Because I have a hat as someone who lives in the state and pays taxes. So these are some of my dollars too. And then I have a hat of a business owner who's in the telecommunication industry with an entity that's been here over 40 years. And this is what we do for a living. We build networks. So my perspective is going to be a little unique, and some it may shock. So first and foremost, anytime that you can expand reach and you can expand reach to unserved areas, I'm all in. Let's double down and do it twice on Sunday. I am absolutely all in anytime we can do that, because I told you how it makes me feel when I find out that someone doesn't have broadband, when a kid or a child goes home and they don't have access to broadband. I mean, they're lost, and catching up is going to be challenging. So we have to figure that out. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I also say this, on the other side of the hat, I know O2 much and O2 real the cost it takes to build a network and maintain a network. And building a network is one thing, $25 million building a network. Maintaining a network is another thing. Prime example, I construct on my network all year long. Why? Because by the time I finish those upgrades in the peninsula, which we're wrapping up and getting closer to finish now, that we started roughly last June or July. So by the time July gets here, that technology is outdated. So I'm coming back around again to upgrade it. So I made very clear to you that I spent $15 million last year because there was a demand that came in that almost pushed over my supply. We have to be foolish to think there'll never be another pandemic, because there will be something that resembles that. How do you get the funds, the resources, and the talent to accommodate a pandemic when it happens? I had the ability because I have all the staff. Pulled them in, we got it done. So that's my first concern, because when we build this ring, and I say we because I live here, so we build this ring, we got to make sure that we have something in place that allows us to adjust and on the fly with that ring. And that's why I think a public-private partnership is the answer, because I think we don't underestimate what it costs to build. I think we underestimate what it costs to maintain. The maintenance is tremendous. I will be putting in another $10 billion into my network over the next 5 years, just in Hampton Roads. 10 billion with a B. So we've got to look at it that way to make sure that we can manage the upgrades and the enhancements. When let's say we bring a new entity in, a new company, let's say, and this would be a hope, but let's just say Tesla. So they want to open up another facility and they're going to put it here, and it's going to go, yeah, I know somebody's going to be mad when I say this. It's going to go in Chesapeake, out in those wetlands in Chesapeake. That land haven't developed yet, they're sitting in Chesapeake. The demand from that Tesla plant is going to require an upgrade on that ring. And you're going to have to fund it. And then once you upgrade it, every time Tesla does something different, that ring is going to require an upgrade. Because I can tell you now, even though we're sitting here talking about mega capacity with the transatlantic fiber. And we have customers connected to today that we've already connected, but it's a handful of customers because everybody's not doing business abroad that needs that much bandwidth. We're talking about providing 1 gig service that every single customer in the state of Virginia has today from us, 1 gig service. We're talking about 10 gig being the future. And that's going to be a huge jump. What I didn't tell you is my business customers are operating 100 gig service for me today, 100 gigs. So, and that demand's only going to grow. So it's about how do you make the partnership work so you can anticipate, fund, and construct what happens after you build it. Because the day you put the last shovel in the ground, the network's outdated. And that's real.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you for taking the time to answer that. We have an interesting question from Andy. He says, it's great that we're all very excited about this for the 757, but he is asking for some context about what other regions are doing and how we compare.
Well, I think you've seen some other regions leap out in front on this. You know, this concept of having a backbone system is something that has been pursued in other metropolitan regions. I think that some, because of what the points that JD's pointed out, have gone public-private. Others have gone in on their own. And JD, jump in if you don't agree, please. But I think there's been a variety of opinions, some successful, some not, right? I think that's fair to say, right? Here's where I think, and JD, I'll look for your additional input on this. Here's where I think we have an advantage, though. And again, you know, I'm a community planner. So at first I said, okay, you know, we have broadband, so does Northern Virginia. What's the difference? Well, as I've been educated, the closer, you know, if you have people selling on the global market, financial trading, et cetera, milliseconds matter, right? And the issue of latency, the further you get where these cables come ashore, and it's not anything I'm going to notice at home. JD, I don't have as many devices as you do hooked up. But for these businesses, what we're hearing is there is an advantage for them to be closer where these cables come ashore. I think that's an advantage for us. I do think we have some advantages that other metropolitan regions don't have. So I'm not going to say, yes, I think we're behind some other regions, probably from a public sector perspective. I think the private sector's been there. JD's described that for you. Maybe the public sector, you know, it took these cables to say, wow, this is the opportunity for us to come aboard. So I think we have some catching up to do, but I think we got a pathway to get there.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. We have a question for JD from Rose. She says, with the expansion of fiber optics and all the advances happening, do you see broadband becoming a free national product while the paid services cater to better technologies? In your mission of life, water, broadband, does this include global projects as much of the world is without broadband?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, one of the things I probably pointed out, broadband is expensive. It is really expensive. Like I said, the last 3 years alone, across the country, we've spent $500 million with a B. I think when you think about air, water, and broadband, those three things I put together, air is free, water is not. We all know that living in Hampton Roads, water is not free. And I don't see broadbanding being free. I think broadband access will change. I think you're going to find, like, if you go to places like one of my favorite islands, Aruba, if you go to Aruba and when you register in the hotel and you pay this flat fee, broadband's free all across the country once all across the island when you do that. And I think we're going to get to a model where you're going to see things like that, where in the common areas, you'll have access to broadband. But from a business perspective, no, it won't, because the size of the pipe that they need. And it goes to a point that Bob just said about being closer to where we are, these connections. Well, part of that, Bob, is the latency. I think with the technology, we'll be able to overcome that. So the speed from here and the speed from Northern Virginia will be relevant. I think that, but here's where the difference is, Bob. The cost to construct. The closer you are to the source, the lower your cost of construction is. So the less expenses these businesses are going to have to pay. And that's where we're gonna win, because the ecosystem around these cables is where we win. That's the strength we have, the advantage and opportunity we have. I think the latency, which is a very valid point today, will probably not be a valid point by the time I offer 10G. It won't be a valid point.
Good news there. And it sounds like a great opportunity for us to wrap up the conversation and say thank you both for joining us today. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, JD. It's been a really interesting conversation and such exciting opportunities for the Hampton Roads area. So thanks so much. And I think we should think about that marketing, air, water, and broadband. That's good. That's great. Bob, back to you.
Okay, thanks to everybody. That was a fantastic conversation, great information. And I'm starting to feel some of the same excitement that I was feeling in February of 2020 before the pandemic hit. So I think we're coming to the end of the tunnel, and we're going to start accelerating fast again. And thanks to people like Bob Crum and JD Myers and Hampton City Schools and the Academies of Hampton, John Caggiano, for all that they do for our region. So I'm sure that many of our viewers today feel as passionate about this topic as we all do. I'm sure that you're also fired up and ready to take some action to ensure the successful future of our community and our economy and our workforce. And the Peninsula Chamber, in partnership with various partners like the ones represented on the panel today, would like to help facilitate action moving forward. The first step will be a very short survey that we'll send to all of you this week, all of the participants on the call. Please take the time to answer it, because your opinion is valuable to us. And then stay tuned as we move forward together, and we'll continue this conversation. So before I close, I'd just like to talk about our next upcoming events in this series. We're going to do one later in March about tourism, hospitality, and culture. Then we're going to do one on public safety, and probably in the near future one on science and technology. We also have, and I'm not going to share any secrets with you today, but we're working on an event that's going to be very exciting in the realm of science and technology. It's going to be a virtual spotlight on the peninsula, and Cox was a supporter of that series when we used to do it in person. We're going to do it virtually for right now, but we'll get back to in person this summer, I hope. But we've got an exciting event that we're working towards right now. So on that note, I'd like to thank Cox once again for being the presenting sponsor and the series sponsor. And thanks to all of you who joined us and stuck with us to the very end. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. Talk to you all soon.